welcome to Let's Play Gran Turismo 3, episode 100. And where it is now time for Endurance Event number 10, which ironically enough is also both our final Endurance event as well as also being the final International A license event of this game overall. And I've already decided on which car I'm using, because, well, judging by the lackluster competence of the AI around Monaco, I'm going to try this thing. Regardless of how heavy this thing might be, as my finger just rubs the mic a little there, I think it is possible for me to win the event using this thing, regardless of how heavy it is. And so, that's what I'm going to do. I think it is worth the risk, so that's basically what I'm going to do. So, gonna put on the Super Slicks. Should probably also mention this is not my first attempt of recording this. And so, let's head over to the Mistral 78 laps, which is basically the Monaco Grand Prix, except for saying it isn't because, well, there are no F1 cars in this event. Alright, so 500 grand if we can win this event. This is one of the big ones, of course, along with the Route 11 Endurance where you can win $500,000. And, yeah, let's get to it. Let's get to Monaco, and where for this event I'm pretty sure we will have some pretty even competitors. So, in this race we have a Panos Esperante GTR1, along with a Toyota GT1, a Toyota Altezza, Nissan R390, and a Jag XJ220. And already I just heard thunder outside, probably because a thunderstorm is brewing. So, gonna take off the assists because I don't need them. I'm also gonna give this thing just a wee bit more downforce, and except for saying on this attempt, these gears are pretty wide, so I'm going to shorten those considerably. And hopefully that should be everything I need to keep myself up to speed with these AI. And... oh, hold on. Yeah, that should do it. Oh, okay, let's get going to 78 laps of presumable capture. Already, just like that, I am starting to skid off the line. Although I can definitely say I gave myself more acceleration by lowering the gears because I have a lot more speed in this thing than I had previously. And already the Toyota GT1 has built himself up to an early lead, and hopefully this time the car won't be dragging as much as it did in the original attempt of me recording this. So we'll just wait and see. Anyways, I just chose to record this anyway. So hopefully I will have enough speed to get through the corners. I mean, I've definitely managed to increase my speed since I lowered the gears. So, overall, at the very least I can say that is a difference, at the very least. Oh fuck, I just got bumped by the R390. Well, I figured that was more or less going to be the case in the early stages, so I might as well trade some paint in response to that. And I just did that because, well, he boofed me into the wall, figured I had to more or less do the same thing. And I think it's fair to say I've definitely got some more acceleration than I had previously. And hopefully this time I will be a little bit more self-conscious of how much weight this thing has. Because this is a muscle car, because this is still a muscle car, and I'm pretty sure this thing will still be heavy, so I will probably drop back in the early stages, but yeah, that's more or less what I come to expect. But hopefully, by the time it comes down to pit stops, I can eventually manage to persevere and take the lead over the course of a single stint, because that's really where this race is going to be decided. It's going to be decided on pit stops, methinks. Although I can definitely see how much of a difference this has made. Because even though my car is loose, at the very least I can say I do not have to wait as long for the gearing to commence itself. So I think I actually made a reasonable call to shorten the gearing for this event, because unlike the previous attempt, I'm actually keeping up with the R390. He's not spreading his legs out too much in comparison to me, nor is the Toyota in fact, so I am keeping a close eye on the competition as it stands at the present time. Hopefully I'll be alright by the time... Oh yeah, that is a braking zone I forgot about. And already my front tyres are showing signs of punishment, as I would have more or less predicted. Should have probably shortened them a little bit more, but again, I think I'm a bit more competitive with this since I'm not pulling as much speed on the gearing of this thing. So at least I can say I'm feeling more competitive now than I was in the previous attempt, because, well, I can see acceleration has definitely picked up. Yeah, my ear was just blocked for some reason. I couldn't tell you why. But anyways, at the moment, not falling too far back to the Toyota, so if I can manage to stay within like probably 15 or 16 seconds during the first stint, I should be okay for at least the first run. Although my lap times are definitely faster than they were previously, because my previous best lap time I set was, at least my fastest lap time I set was pretty much a 1:37. So I think I can notice the difference that myself shortening my gears has made. Even though I could have shortened them just a little bit more, so that I could keep up to speed with the R390 down the straights. But again, I would say I've definitely managed to pick up some acceleration from where I previously couldn't, considering how high my gears were originally. So I did have to shorten those considerably just to make myself a competitor, and I think that's exactly what I've managed to do. Because I'm more or less keeping on par with the R390 as it currently stands. He's not managing to pull away from me. And even though I've not been able to pass him yet, at the very least I can say that I am keeping myself within the draft of the R390. Even though the Toyota is briefly extending his lead, he's extending his lead nowhere near as much as he was originally. And yes, I did figure I had to give the R390 a fair share of paint, but it'd probably done the same thing to me anyway, because, well, that's just the nature of the AI in this game. Even though they still have more speed than me down the straights. And a little bit of contact there with the outside wall, but at least I can say I'm up to... And that's it. But at least I can say I'm a bit more up to spec with the prototypes now than I was previously. Because even though my car did have the pace, I think it was just because of how high my gears were originally that I knew very well something had to be done if I was going to see myself being a competitor for the race win. Because gears of course have to be short if you're going to make yourself a competitor on a course like this. And oh fuck me, I completely missed the entry to the pool chicanes. Just completely missed that entry. Really got squabbled up there. But I would say we're Gucci, because I'm not falling too far back to the Toyota. He's extending his lead, but he's not extending it by too much. It's only 5 seconds. I'm sure if I can stay within like probably 7 or 8 seconds, possibly even 9 or 10, I might be able to jump in on the pit stop cycles. Even then, of course, if I don't have enough acceleration to compete. But again, I'm managing to handle most of these corners a lot less terribly than these AI are. So the Toyota was briefly within my sights there, but again, just trying to go as steady as I can as I tiptoe my way around this course. I mean, this is a tough course to master, even though the course of this one beats the reality course. And I think that did help me there by shifting down to second. I mean, even though I got wheel spin, fortunately I was able to close up to the Toyota as I went down the harder straight. As we now head through La Massenet, and then we've got the Rascasse, the final corner right before the bus stop stretch. And a little bit of contact there with that inside wall, but I'm not falling too far back, I don't think. I just need to try and see if I can put in consistent lap times. And then if I can manage to salvage some consistently good lap times, then maybe I might be able to possibly stay in touch with the Toyota once pit stops have happened. I mean, the gap at the moment is only 5 seconds, so I am closing in. I know the Toyota might be quicker than me up to this stage in the race, but again, I'm pretty sure there is a possibility for me to say for sure that I will eventually manage to jump him on the pit stops. I mean, it's basically what I've been doing prior to this. So, you know, that is something I would like to collect myself up on. So far, not made considerable signs of progress, but I'm definitely running more consistently on this run than I was on the previous run. Because, well, personally, I think with the gearing that I had originally, that was way too fucking high to be competitive for a circuit like this. And now, since I shortened those considerably, I would say I've managed to make this car easier to push on the throttle as well as get through the corners. So, I think my decision to lower the gears had helped me out considerably, because I'm now only 4 seconds behind the Toyota. So it doesn't look as though the GT1 is going to be staying out in front for much longer. I would think his tyres are probably going to start deflating up to this point, And you also have to add that on, of course, to the consistency of how poor the AI are in terms of their competence around this circuit, which does also help me out in some cases, and also why I use and also why exactly I chose to use the Camaro for this. And I'm really closing in, so his tyres must have really faded off in those final 2 laps. And he's gone straight into the wall, and he's coming into the pits, so only 8 laps into the race, and already he has officially made the electoral choice to pit. And where hopefully I can manage to eventually beat out the R390 to the line. And already his first pit stop has been done because, well, pit stops are pretty quick in this game. They're only like probably 14 or 15 seconds overall in terms of tyre stops. So yeah, pit stops are pretty quick in this game. And well, oddly enough, I would say at the moment that I am doing pretty well with this setup. I just chose to switch myself to, so I'm managing to salvage a lot more acceleration on this attempt than I was the previous one. I think I should have probably shortened the gears sooner, because I already have an interval to the R390, and it doesn't look as though he's going to be staying there for much longer. Because even though I do have a 4-second gap now to the Nissan after 9 laps basically, I would say there is still some on-track pace yet to be gained. But again, he is staying out, so there is the distinct possibility. I mean, even though I don't know how to set up cars, at the very least I can say I do know when to add more downforce, and I also know when to adjust the transmission, which is essentially what I did, because I knew very well those gears were too high for a circuit like this. So, figured I had to adjust them, and I think I would say, even though this is not the perfect setup to get around Monaco, at the very least I can definitely say it is a better gearing setup than I had previously. And even though I'm not hitting top speed, at the very least I can still say that I'm managing to give myself the benefits of being less terrible around this circuit than his AI. Which is primarily the main reason why I'm not necessarily twitching too much at the moment. And even though there has been some twitching, I know very well that up to this point, and even though I am crashing a lot, up to this point I could say I've got a lot more acceleration out of this car since I shortened the gears. So I would say that was a beneficial decision on my part, because I'm now already 5.7 seconds clear of the Nissan. In some cases I might have even overdone it a little with the gearing, but you know. At the moment I really don't have any problems with the setup I'm currently running. I would say I actually made myself a pretty good choice once I shortened the gears. I made myself a bit more competitive than I was, coincidentally. And well, because this is a city course, don't see any signs of dirt yet, so I would say things are going more or less as I planned. So yeah, I think it can basically use any race car that has over 400 horsepower and yet somehow eventually win the event if you could give yourself the right amount of tuning. And I've now built up to a 7-second interval over the R390. Meanwhile, the GT1 at the moment is not looking like he's on pace with myself or the Nissan, even though I'm still continuing to make a more or less precedented corrosion with these walls, as like just constantly, you know, colliding into the walls whenever I can, and just not getting the opportunity to correct myself under those regards. I just didn't quite get the entry right through there, through to back before the swimming pool section. Also, by the way, yes, that is a diving board you just saw there on the right hand side of the screen. So, it would appear as though the Nissan is going to be my main competition in this race. And also, as I say that, I now set a new fastest lap of a 135 dead. Sorry, a 135 flat. Yeah. Just had to correct myself from when I said that it was actually a 135 flat, because it wasn't all zeros in the end. Also, furthermore, as is with typical English weather, well, British English weather, if I'm being pedantically specific about this, it's raining outside my house, and already I can say at the moment I am certainly benefiting from this choice, because I'm already starting to pull away pretty much a second a lap over these AI, and all of this just because I have superior tyres along with a superior gearing ratio. And I'm just basically continuing to motor away from the R390 up to this point, so it doesn't appear as though he's going to be a competitor before this day is done. Although one thing I can confirm for certain is that I'm just continually pulling away at the moment. Since I took the lead, I've just managed to continually pull away, and now the R390 is in the pits, and the Toyota now goes past him very briefly, but again, he's got to pit in only 2 laps time, so I would think the Nissan, if my maths is correct, will have to make a total of, let's see, about 5 pit stops before the end of the day. And as for the Toyota, well, I would think he's got to make about, let's see, yeah, I'm just trying to do math. A total of 9 pit stops at the end of the day, and both of them have already made their first, and I'm pretty sure it will be unquestionably the R390 that stays ahead of the GT1, because we have two Toyotas in this race, and already I'm coming up to overlap Jack, and made a little bit of contact there as I was trying to overlap him. He wasn't giving me the space, but made a little bit of contact with him, and already I can safely say I am increasing my gap in pretty much tenfold up to this point. Although keep in mind, of course, I am using the super slick tyres like I have been for pretty much all the other endurance events up to this point. So that's probably the main reason why I'm getting really good tyre mileage. Even then, of course, if, you know, gas mileage isn't a thing in this game. But again, I'm doing pretty good at the moment. And I would think if I'm lucky I'll only have to make about 3, maybe even 4 pit stops, even though it's most likely to be 3 because, well, my tyres at the moment are in good condition, and it doesn't look as though there is going to be anything that sounds very wrongful about this decision. Although, I would think the racing order by now has pretty much decided itself. Oh, fuck me. Yep. The Esperante got really aggressive there. He does not want me to overlap. He's just literally trying to wreck me. Which, apparently, he successfully does. And I should have opened my window up some more, because I'm still sweating. Although, fortunately for me at least, I do have water right in front of me, which is also right in front of my TV, so, you know, that's there for me in case if I do end up overheating, but at the moment, this has been a pretty interesting race. And so the Toyota does now manage, of course, to take back second position once again, and if it's possible, before the end of the day, I might even overlap the entire field before this day is done. Something I would have honestly thought for sure I was not going to end the endurance events I'm doing. Although then again, this is Monaco, because, well, the AI don't really know how to get around Monaco consistently, but at the very least I can definitely say that I have a lot more consistency around this course than the AI does. And well, I think as far as I know, this track in terms of its distance, I would say it's probably somewhere just under 200 miles. I don't know how many kilometers it is, but I think it's somewhere around 200 miles, more or less. I think it is fair to say that it won't be too long before I pit in, as once again the GT1 comes into the pits. Although, dependent on how far back the R390 is, could very well tell the story of how Gucci exactly I'm going to be before this day is done. Because even though the R390 is more consistent on the tyres than the Toyota is, that could very well be a change of leadership before this day is done. And the Altazza is not giving me the space to get by, although it doesn't matter anyway because I still pass him on the inside with almost no trouble whatsoever, except for a little bump. So, you know, there is that. Although, at the very least, I'm more than fortunate enough to say that I'm probably a pit stop clear of both the prototypes by now, so I would say up to this point I can probably make a pit stop and yet still manage to take the lead somehow, because that is how much more acceleration I have in this car by pure comparison to what the AI have. And oddly enough, the setup I put on this thing has definitely benefited me, because I appear to be pulling away from the prototypes. As the matter presently stands, I'm just continuing to pull away, and my lap times are more or less high 135s, low 136s for the most part. So, you know, there is that. There's also the part on knowing when exactly I'm going to make pit stop number 1. Because it looks like it might. Because it looks like this car might go further than I anticipated. And well, even though I've been doing a lot of crashing in this race, at the very least I can definitely say I'm definitely within a continual process of just pretty much separating myself from the leaders. So I could very well lap the entire field before this day is done with the way I'm going at the moment. I might actually win this thing by a lap, if I'm fortunate enough. Although then again, I won't be too hasty over what exactly my expectations are, because again, I still don't know if I will or won't win the race, but since I'm yet to pit in this race at the moment, I'm pretty sure that that will hopefully be what precisely gets me, you know, towards the end of this race by the time the day is done. I might have to make only 2 pit stops in this race if I get lucky, but I won't be taking any chances. Even though my tyres at the moment are going very well, so I might even be able to finish this race in just over 2 hours, considering that's how long the actual Monaco Grand Prix usually takes. And well, most of the time Monaco is pretty boring. Monaco is pretty boring unless there's actual chaos on track. Although, one thing in the F1 history books that I never will forget about Monaco is that, well, 2 races that weren't necessarily sleepers, well, 3 races actually. One of them, which wasn't a sleeper and I read about, was 1975, where Niki Lauda had essentially held off a hard-charging Emerson Fittipaldi in the closing stages of the Monaco Grand Prix in 1975 after his oil pressure had dropped. Lauda was eventually able to go onwards and win the race by just pretty much 2.4 seconds over the reigning world champion at that time, because Emerson was driving for McLaren and Emerson was in a Ferrari. Sorry, Emerson was in a McLaren and Lauda at the time was in a Ferrari. I suppose you could also say there was 1966, where there was only 4 classified finishers at the end of the race, which oddly enough I do believe is the lowest classification order in F1 history. I do ever forget the drama of 1996, where Olivier Panis had ironically won a chaotic Belgian Grand Prix where pretty much everyone else on circuit by the end of the race had pretty much died. There was only really 3 finishers at the end, but there were 7 classified finishers overall from the 22 starters in that race. I mean, Olivier Panis effectively won that race after Damon Hill's engine blew. I mean, Damon was basically driving the perfect race at the time, of course, and then suddenly, once his oil pressure light turned red, it was pretty evident, really, that his engine at that time had pretty much blew. And effectively allowed Olivier Panis to take the lead. Meanwhile, for Jacques Villeneuve, who was Damon's teammate at the time, he did not officially manage to close up because, well, he too was taken out in a crash. I think that was with Luca Badoa, as far as I know. I think that was the driver who took him out. I mean, there was a team called 40 at the time. And that's spelt F-O-R-T-I. Basically that team, of course, didn't even score a single point. Not even with the likes of the capable Brazilian Pedro Diniz. They didn't end up scoring a point in the end. And ultimately the team itself had basically folded mid-season. Also, furthermore, another race that many of us probably won't forget is, I think it was like 2010 when there was a similar attrition rate in this race. Where Mark Webber had eventually held off what I think was a hard-charging Fernando Alonso. I couldn't tell you to be sure, but Mark Webber did eventually manage to win this race, as did David Coulthard in 2002, when he was fending off from a hard-charging Michael Schumacher. DC had literally led that entire race from start to finish, even though ultimately it was McLaren's only win that season. And well, in 15 out of the 17 races that were held in 2002, I think Ferrari had won 15 of those races. Basically, 11 wins to Schumi and 4 wins to Rubino. I think that was undoubtedly Michael Schumacher's best season by a long shot, because he finished every race on the podium that season, and that I know for sure is one F1 record that will not be broken again anytime soon, unless there's one team that really is that dominant. I mean, pretty much no one, not even Mercedes, has actually managed to achieve that record, basically finishing every race on the podium. That's one record I know for sure in the F1 history books that will not be broken anytime soon. Schumi did actually achieve that, and effectively became the first person to score points in every race of the season since Juan Manuel Fangio. Even though for 2 seasons running, Lewis Hamilton, for 3 seasons running in his career, Lewis Hamilton has more or less done the same thing. And yet, oddly enough, of course, even though his scoring streak in the 2021 season ended at Azerbaijan, if you remember that race, ultimately overall, even though his point scoring streak had ended in Azerbaijan, this season, effectively overall his finishing streak still stands. I mean, a finishing streak that's basically dated all the way back to pretty much Silverstone 2018. I mean, Lewis has not had a DNF in pretty much 3 years now, and I think it's fair to say that I would think Lewis by now was probably long overdue for a did not finish. I mean, he's already set the record for the the most races he can score points in, but again, a DNF is the one thing he still has not had in comparison to his fellow drivers. And oddly enough, I am hopeful that sooner or later Lewis will have a DNF. I mean, he has to. He knows very well that he cannot just keep scoring points the way he currently is. He has to have a DNF at some point. It's bound to happen sooner or later. I mean, I don't have any problems with Lewis Hamilton as a driver. I mean, as an everyday person, it's probably understandable because, well, Lewis Hamilton tends to complain about some of the most minor problems, and he can often tend to be controversial from time to time, but he's essentially like Kyle Busch in a way, you know, because even though he was basically all guns blazing when he was a young driver, effectively overall, over pretty much the past 6 or 7 years, he has managed to improve himself. Although, ultimately overall, of course, I would probably say since the last time he lost a championship, which I think was like, what year was it, 2016? Yeah. I think essentially since 2016, which was the last time he had officially lost a championship, ultimately overall I would say his demeanour since then really hasn't changed that much, I wouldn't think. Well, my tyres are getting a little bit worn up to this point, so I am dropping off the pace a little bit, but I'm not really dropping off enough to just head straight into the pits, you know. I mean, there are only really 2 drivers I can think of that have actually outscored Lewis Hamilton in a season. One of them, ironically, is Nico Rosberg, obviously. Although one that many people don't seem to remember outscoring Lewis Hamilton is Jenson Button. Because ironically enough, Jenson is the only other driver I can think of, you know, JB, who has actually outscored Lewis Hamilton on a seasonal basis. The one thing that literally hasn't happened pretty much since Rosberg won the championship. And it was basically a season, of course, where Mercedes had pretty much repeated McLaren's dominance from the 1988 season. Well, I think it's safe to say that I can go one more lap on this set of tyres from what I can understand. But it's more or less fair to say that I'm clearly dominating this event now. And there's pretty much no turning back over what I've already done with this thing. Because I am now half a minute clear of the R390. I think. Exactly is 26 times 3. 52. Yeah, that's about dead on 78 laps. Also, yes, I'm doing math again, because apparently that is a skill I have that many people do not know about. At least the simple parts of math are what I'm good at doing. And I don't know why I let go of the throttle there. I guess my thumb just slipped off the analog stick. I guess that's what it was that caused me to use off the throttle. Yep, okay. I think it probably is about time for me to pit in this lap, because I'm getting no bite through the corners. Yeah, okay. I need to pit in this lap. Yeah, okay. I think now is the time for me to pit. I mean, if I pit in now, I'll basically rejoin as the leader anyway. So, I think now probably is the best time for me to pit in. And also a time for me to get a sip of water. Because that's important. Oh, shit, I forgot how short the pit exit is. Although it doesn't matter because the R390 just pits it. After only like 12 laps on that stint. So I think it's fair to say the R390 is clearly my main competitor for this race. And I can safely say that I am on cold tyres. But it's fine because this is my almost went straight into the wall there, but fortunately in the end I did not make contact with the wall. So R390 closing in a little bit, but I don't think I'm closing enough to stop me from winning this race. I could have probably bought the race in slips if I really wanted to, just to make this a bit more of a challenge, but again, I don't even think that's a concern up to this point. But again, even though my front tyres were not showing too much wear, even though my rear tyres were not showing too much wear, the truth is, I would not have been able to go another lap around this circuit if I wanted to, because my front tyres were virtually shot. Because I literally had no bite. I literally had no biting points in the corners whatsoever. I had to pit, or else I was just literally going to be crashing for probably the next lap. So I went 26 laps on that first set of tyres. And I would think that I will manage to probably go up to the end of the race on potentially a two-stop strategy, if I'm lucky. I'm not concentrating. I probably will be able to go for potentially a two-stop strategy if I'm lucky. Considering I am recording this on Thursday. Should have probably checked the pretty sure it is. I guess I'm going to have to do it once I get out of the portier, just to check and see if my microphone is still running. I mean, I know it's right in front of me, but it just depends on knowing if it's switched on or not. I'm hopefully saying that it is, more or less, but we'll just have to wait and see. Yep, okay, it's on. Yeah, just had to turn away for a split second there, but it's fine. My mic is on, as which I basically just keep saying that before I start recording, because I just literally have to know if my microphone is switched on or not. And what I've learned, of course, is that first gear through lows hairpin is not a good idea. So I'm going to have to avoid first gear through there. I could probably go in there using second gear, but using first gear, I still think that's a no-no. Even then, of course, if I had to stutter briefly there. But yeah, I can safely say up to this point, I'm going to dominate this race. There is no questions about that. I am just clearly the dominator up to this point. Right, so 27.5 seconds now to the R390. What are the races at Monaco? With hero road sleepers. I think there was like... Because as far as I know, 1984 wasn't necessarily a sleeper, because that was literally held into a wrench rain, and pretty much cars were literally dropping out. Of that race, more or less like 9 or 10 pins. And already, I'm now going to overlap the Jag once again, who is now right behind the Aspirante, as they both immediately run into the wall at the Massonnet. And I'm going to suspect for the Aspirante it was because he had dead tyres. So I think this is going to put the Jag ahead of the Aspirante, as far as I know, but it will probably be very brief because the Jag will have to pit eventually. And I don't think the leaders have pitted, sorry, the back markers have pitted yet. Because I'm pretty sure this is my second time around. This is the second time around for me overlapping the back markers. I'm pretty sure the back markers by now are probably 2 laps down, from what I can understand. And ultimately now, of course, I can safely say that I am starting once again extend lead. I guess I can take some of these corners in second gear. Well, I don't think the back markers have stopped for the pit stops yet. As of which it looks like the Altezza just stopped in for the first time, from what I can understand. But again, I think at the moment I can safely say that I'm more or less putting myself within the conduction of saying that I'm now beginning to dominate this race, because I'm pretty much half a minute clear of the Toyota, who I'm pretty sure has to stop in again, considering he literally has to make a total of 9 pit stops before this day is done. So that effectively means, of course, that his final pit stop will be coming on pretty much lap 72, so very much 2 laps before the end, as far as I know. Although ironically enough, of course, even though many people know very well that Ayrton Senna was the master of Monaco for many years, effectively overall another master of Monaco was arguably the likes of Graham Hill. Considering Graham Hill himself had literally earned the nickname Mr. Monaco because of how many times he won the race here. He literally won this race 5 times during his career, and it was arguably the same course where his racing career had pretty much much started and ended. I mean, Graham Hill had competed in at least one race for 17 straight years, and he notably made a total of 176 race starts during his career. Graham Hill was notably Mr. Monaco himself, because he won here 5 times during his career, and if I remember correctly, he won here 3 times with BRM, which was British Racing Motors, and he also won here for Lotus twice on the trot in 68 and 69. Although 1967 for Graham wasn't necessarily a good season, because, well, following his 1965 runner-up finish to Jim Clark, his next 2 seasons, I would say, were pretty dismal in comparison, because he was pretty much nowhere near the front compared to everyone else in terms of consistency. I mean, 1966 was very much dominated by Jack Brabham, because he was clearly the most consistent driver all season. And is this going to be a new PB? Yes, it is. It is a 1:34.9. That is now a new best lap time by just over a tenth. Anyways. So yeah, Graham Hill had basically won here at Monaco 5 times in the 60s. He was very much one of the winningest drivers of the 60s overall. And he was only really bested by very few drivers at the time in terms of overall wins. And I think one of those drivers that bested him was ultimately Jim Clark. Considering in 1968, when he had officially won what was his 25th and last Grand Prix, ironically it was also the last Grand Prix that Jim Clark had officially entered ever, because he was essentially killed in a Formula 2 crash at Hockenheimring, and this is notably the old Hockenheimring, don't forget. And effectively, because of a presumable mechanical failure, Jimmy had literally went straight into the trees at over 150 miles an hour, which back then of course was very quick for race cars at that time, and it was also a lot less safe than it is now, but ultimately, overall of course, the injuries that Clark had sustained, of course, from that crash at Hockenheimring, it was pretty clear to say, of course, that his injuries were fatal. And I think, as far as I know, as a result, he basically died instantly. And I think, as far as I know, Graham Hill did also say, of course, that if a crash like that can happen to Jimmy, then it can basically happen to anyone. And oddly enough, that is a very true statement. Because even though the 70s was essentially an improvement in safety, effectively there were still lots of drivers at the time that were still getting killed in separate crashes. Whether they essentially be, from off-track accidents, or if they're basically just from accidents on track in general. I mean, the 60s were dark times for motorsport. The same, in fact, can also be said for the 50s as well as the 70s. But ultimately, overall, there's only really one driver who has managed to beat Graham Hill's record in terms of, officially winning the Monaco Grand Prix, and I think that one driver that bested him was Ayrton Senna, because he won here at Monaco 6 times during his career. Though arguably overall, he could have very well won here 7 years in a row. Except for saying, of course, that whilst Senna was clearly the master of Monaco at the time, he was very much... At the same time, he was also very much... the only driver who could officially have a winning streak at Monaco of pretty much 5 years in a row. Because basically from 1989 to 93, Senna had won here 5 years in a row to add on to the win he already had. To basically add on, of course, to the win he already had with Lotus in 1987. And whilst I'm basically explaining all of these facts and figures about Monaco, another man who did pretty successful around Monaco was ultimately the likes of Michael Schumacher. Considering he too, of course, like Graham Hill, had won here 5 times in the past, even though in the later stages of his career, Monaco was not necessarily Schumacher's sort of circuit. Although, ironically enough, in 2012 he did actually manage to win the pole here at Monaco, but ultimately because of the wreck he had with Bruno Senna in the previous race, which I think was held in Spain at the time, Schumacher was ultimately given a 5-place penalty and had to start from, I think, 6th position as a result of him causing the crash with Bruno Senna, which, ironically enough, as far as I know, was clearly one that he was responsible for. I mean, I know Schumacher wasn't as much... I know Schumacher didn't have as much skill in his later years, but that was simply because he didn't have the car to prove that he could... prove, of course, that he could still win. Although, ironically enough, of course, both himself and Luca Di Montezemolo at the time, who was the chief executive of Ferrari at the time, basically the chairman of the Ferrari team at the time. He knew very well that he basically had enough of Michael being in that seat, and eventually, overall, of course, he was replaced by the 2007 World Champion, which eventually turned out to be Kimi Raikkonen. Although oddly enough, of course, one thing that didn't help Schumacher in terms of himself getting a return to the Ferrari team, potentially, whilst he was essentially on the sidelines, ultimately, at the time, of course, of when Felipe Massa had a bad crash at Hungaroring in 09. Ultimately, Schumacher was not there to replace him because, ironically, Schumacher himself, of course, was injured in a motorcycle crash, which prevented him from officially substituting for Felipe Massa, and ultimately overall, of course, the substitute driver ironically turned out to be Luca Badoa, who I think was only in the Ferrari seat for one race, and as he would have more or less expected, he underperformed, and then of course he was quickly replaced by the likes of the Italian racing driver Giancarlo Fisichella, the driver who did, of course, eventually take over Felipe Massa's role, along with Kimi Raikkonen up to the end, up to pretty much the end of the 09 season. And I'm just weaving left and right at the moment. Anyways, we have now passed an hour, so I'm pretty sure this will probably take somewhere just over 2 hours for me to complete. But it's pretty much synonymous up to this point that I'm clearly dominating this race. By the pure comparison of what would be happening, comparison of what would be happening had there been a Mazda 787B in this race. I'm pretty sure he would have probably been the only car that would have, you know, actually managed to keep up with me. Although, oddly enough, of course, up to this point in the race, it is safe to say that I'm clearly the dominator. Any doubts in my mind, I virtually have nothing to lose. Up to this point in the race, I am less than a lap clear of the Toyota, and I would think it's only a matter of time before I do manage to overlap them. Although I think on that stint the Toyota only took 7 laps, so he didn't quite go up to the distance I would have expected him to go up to, but again, that really isn't any problem because I'm still dominating this race anyway because of my superior tyre mileage, which is basically the main reason why I've been managing to dominate this race for so long, and also why exactly I've now put both the Aspirante and the Jag XJ and the Jag XJ now 3 laps down. So, 1 minute and 4 seconds to the Toyota. I think it's fair to say he's definitely got more pace up to this point than the R390 does. Even though the R390 is able to go, of course, with the longer stints, he's not necessarily able to keep up with myself on the Toyota. So pit stops could be the deciding factor before this day is done, although I'm pretty sure this will put the R390 back up into second position as a result. I don't know how the results will look overall, but I'm pretty sure that I will overlap both of them before this race is done, because I'm on a hot streak right now of, you know, basically just being faster than the AI, by default of me having more competence to actually get through the corners rather than just, you know, wrecking every lap that I try to put in. And well, because this is a city course, my car still looks pretty shiny, because we're on a city course. So, at the moment, I can say I'm definitely going good. The way this thing looks. And even then, of course, if I don't win even then, of course, if I don't win a good prize car from this event, I can still more or less win a good prize car from once I've completed this race, because I've essentially done all the other endurance events. So it's more or less inevitable that once I've done this race I will probably get 2 prize cars. Although, dependent on knowing if one of them is an F1 car or not, that probably remains to be seen, but I'm not going to reveal any spoilers. Although then again, if this really was the Monaco Grand Prix, it would probably have to have... Oh, okay. I just went half a second quicker on that lap by setting a 1:34.1. Sorry, 1:34.1 was the time I set on that lap, so I would say that was pretty good. But I think it's fair to say it will not be long before I overlap the R390 with the GT1, because it does not look like they're going to be staying on the lead lap much longer, I don't think. Though oddly enough, of course, I did have an interesting scrap with the GT1 at Route 11 when I was driving the Viper, because the GT1 had proven, of course, to have more acceleration than the Master did, and since I knew very well he was my only real competition once it came down to strategy, the GT1 was actually quite a fierce competitor on the short runs. And I think that's more or less what he is here, but again, the undercuts I don't think are as beneficial around this circuit as they are around other circuits. I think you basically need an overcut in order to win here at Monaco, because you basically have to make the least pit stops all day in order to actually win the Monaco Grand Prix and, you know, more or less survive it if it becomes a race of attrition. As of which, Monaco does effectively have the highest attrition rate of any other F1 circuit on the calendar. And well, even though lots of people think it's not worth it to have the Monaco Grand Prix on the calendar because of how dull the racing is, I think the only reason why the drivers still continue to race at Monaco is ultimately because of the fans. I mean, that's the only reason why they're continuing to race at Monaco, even though the racing itself most of the time is very boring. Yes, I am saying that from personal experience, because I have watched the Monaco Grand Prix numerous times, and there really aren't many exciting races I can think of. Although ironically enough, it was also here on this very same circuit where in 2011 Vitaly Petrov, if I remember correctly, had a pretty heavy collision here, although I couldn't tell you who the driver was. But I do know the driver that was involved in the crash, and I think it was down at... Oh shit. Yeah, I really got a twitch of oversteer there when I shifted down into... When I shifted down into second gear there, but, you know... Anyways... Like I was saying, I'm pretty sure there was a collision here one year that involved Vitaly Petrov. I know very well that's what the driver was that was, you know, involved in that crash, and well, ironically enough, I think Sergio Perez also had a crash at that same Nouvelle Chicane one year. I know it was the Nouvelle Chicane, because that was where the incident happened, and even though I remember it vividly, I know very well that I know very well that it was very much in those same tyre barriers where that crash had actually happened. Even though originally here at Monaco there was not as much interior designing from when this race was first, you know, staged, compared of course to what it is now. I mean, Monaco is still very much one of the richest principalities in pretty much the world. I think as far as I know, Monaco is still effectively one of the richest cities in the world, and I'm also pretty certain that Monaco itself has also been the same scene for many great movies in the past, and the main one I can think of is notably Grand Prix. Because I mean, basically what the film Grand Prix is, as well, it's basically a movie based on F1 in the mid-60s, and it's essentially a movie that is based on pretty much the thrills, glamour, excitement and tragedy of Formula 1 at that time, considering it was a lot more dangerous back then compared to what it is now. I mean, even for the movie they raced on the Monza bankings, which overall in my mind were actually pretty terrifying, considering there was only really one stretch of Armco on the outside, and then basically, if you went through that Armco, it was pretty much oblivion. It has happened before, I'm sure it has. Road Driver has pretty much, you know, just gone straight off at the banks, and then just basically landed on the ground in more or less an inferno with the body hanging from the tree. From the tree. I'm sure that's what the movie Grand Prix does state, as far as I know. But yeah, it basically just goes to show you that motor racing nowadays is a lot safer now than it was basically over half a century ago. It is a hell of a lot safer now than it was back then, I can assure you. I mean, even though there were the races of where there weren't officially any steward inquiries, at the same time, of course, they still had race officials, because, well, that's more or less what you need at a track. Even though motor racing nowadays, of course, is basically heavily policed anyway by on-track officials and race stewards, which in some cases I would think is necessary, but in many other cases I wouldn't necessarily think it's always necessary. If you know very well, you're basically just seeing, you know, racing incidents that aren't intentional. I mean, I just consider that to be pure racing. I don't consider that to be anything that's, you know, sort of rubbing salt to the wound kind of scenario, if you want to put it that way. And I am coming very close to the Toyota. He will not stay on the lead lap much longer. I'm sure he will not. I see him right up ahead of me. He will not survive staying on the lead lap much longer, I don't think. Also, furthermore, I am now pretty much well over halfway into this race. Although, at one point of course, the Monaco Grand Prix was originally staged for 100 laps. And I think the first ever winner of the Monaco Grand Prix, if my memory serves me correctly, was Rudolf Caracciola, as of which he did have some reasonable success here at Monaco, for him notably being a pre-war German racing driver, so essentially racing under both the Weimar Republican flags as well as also racing under the Nazi flag, but technically overall of course Rudolf Caracciola in spite of him essentially being a racing driver that was part of the Nazi regime, as was Bernd Rosemeyer, to officially name another one, Caracciola still had some reasonable success here on this circuit, because I think he won this race 3 times if I'm not mistaken. There was also the likes of Tazio Nuvolari. He was another pre-war Grand Prix racing driver, and I think, as far as I know, Sterling Moss, Giuseppe Farina was also a pre-war racing driver. The same in fact can also be said for Fangio, who were basically Grand Prix Racing's 2 first world champions, and Toyota is already in the pits once again. And so, here we are. I've now overlapped most of the field except for the R390, and I think it's only a matter of time up to this point before I do overlap. But yeah, I think the only 2 reasons why they still have Monaco as a stageable race in the F1 world today is probably because of how much reception you basically get from the fans. Because I mean, Monaco is basically the richest race on the calendar in terms of scenery. As well as also being, of course, in terms of being one of the traditional races that has basically been since the championship itself was first held in 1950. Starting to lose a little bit of grip here on the front tyres, although I think it was lap 26 I got up to before I changed the tyres. So I've still got some steering camber in these front tyres, even then of course if it looks like they're dropping off considerably. But again, I think this will be the second and final pit stop that I have to make in this race, and then once I've done that, it will basically be just myself driving pretty much up to the end of this race overall. But yeah, I was certain that once I saw this car with how high the gears were, I knew very well that I had to shorten them if I was going to get more speed. And ironically enough, that is exactly what I've effectively given myself. I've given myself more velocity down the corners, which has also given me arguably more speed through the corners. I think at the most I'm reaching speeds at somewhere just under, I think 140 miles an hour through here, or just about 140 in terms of overall speeds. And I have an itch on my nose, which is very annoying. This is just irritating me. side of my nose. Okay. Back to the race. Okay, this is the lap where I need to hit. Because I'm pretty sure this is where my steering camera is going to drop off completely. Even though I could go 2 more laps if I really wanted to, I don't think there's really any point in me doing that. I don't necessarily think there's any point in me doing that. As I'm now coming up to overlap the Jag once again. Oh, fuck me. I have no idea how I was able to save it, but somehow in the end I did. But yeah, I think I did hit a bump there as I went through the chicane, but I think this is going to be the lap where I hit it again. Even though I could have gone longer on this stint, if I really wanted to, I don't think it's really worth it to take any chances. I mean, even though I'm less than a lap ahead of the rest of the field anyway, and I've basically come down to more or less decimating the opposition up to this point. Effectively, this could probably be the first time since, I think, the Rome Endurance where I have officially overlapped the entire field. So, I think this is the lap where I'm going to pit. Actually, I wasn't far off hitting the tyres there, but anyways, I'm going to take another sip of water. Right. I am back on fresh tyres once again. I think this is where I can now say speed. Because essentially, since the first pit stop, I've basically looked dominant. In terms of the overall outcome of this race. Which, oddly enough, of course, is one thing I didn't necessarily think I'd be doing too much. Although I guess the only reason for that is because I haven't had to deal with the 787B like I have in the past. Because I'm pretty sure this would be a completely different race if I had the 787B as being one of my competitors. But ultimately, overall, that's not proven to be the case, and coincidentally, that is the main reason why I'm dominating. Because I do not have to deal with ultimately, I do not have to deal with the 787B. Although, even then, of course, if he was in this race, I'm pretty sure that I would still beat him because I have the superior tyres. And I think pretty much since the Toyota made his first pit stop, I've pretty much been dominating this race for almost its entirety, except for that particular point. And again, I did have a pretty good reason for using the Camaro, because if I used one of my F1 cars, I would have basically just dominated and finished the race already, but again, I have no ambition towards doing that, so I think all I'm really going to do is just keep myself moving. Since this is pretty much an F1 race, except it isn't, well, an F1 race in terms of distance, but not necessarily an F1 race because, well, neither the Polyphony 001 or 002 are officially making their appearances here. And what I've already established is that, well, first gear is bad. Anyways, I think my tyres are warmed up now, and my lap times are more or less within pretty much the low 134 to high 138 range is what he thinks. And I think I would say up to this point I'm doing very well. I think I would say up to this point I'm doing very well in this race, from what I can understand. So, 54 laps are now complete, and here of course is the classification done, because I'm pretty sure that I've now overlapped the Jag pretty much more or less 5 times up to this point in the race, after like 54 laps and nearly 90 minutes. So the Jag is clearly running at the back, from what I can understand. The rest of the field, well, I am pretty much leading this thing by less than a lap over the Toyota GT1, who looks like he'll probably lose that position again to the R390 before too long, because the R390 is on the better strategy than Toyota. But we'll just have to wait and see how it pans out. So this is the running order after 55 laps. So what I have proven here is that, well, I'm pretty much dominating this race in my Chevy Camaro with my adjusted setup. In second position, as it stands at the moment, is the Toyota GT1, and then in third place it is the Nissan R390 over the Toyota Altezza, who is running in fourth. Then in fifth position it is the Panos Esperante, and then at the back, running I think 5 laps down now, is the Jag XJ220. So that is your running order, and also your updated running order after 56 laps and just over 90 minutes. So, yeah, at the moment we are doing very well. From what I can understand, we are going very well indeed. Well enough for me to say that I am now dominating this race. Alright, so 56 laps are now in the books, and I would think it's only a matter of time before I overlap the R390 with the GT1, because they do not look like they'll be staying on the lead lap much longer. I wouldn't have thought. And well, because strategy is so crucial around a circuit like this, I would think that is probably what will officially play a contributing role into how exactly this race will eventually finish. So, 37 laps have now been completed, and I'm now fast enough to go into the high 133s. Or the high 1 minute 33s, to be specific. So, at the moment, more or less continuing to dominate. I've definitely overlapped the Toyota GT1 by now as a result of me being on a fresh set of tyres. And so, up to this point, I can say for sure that I am definitely dominating this race. Oh, fuck me. I hit the outside wall, which was the main reason why I got wheel spin. Fuck. Can I please drive cleanly without this occurring? Oh, for fuck's sake. Am I suddenly starting to make mistakes now? Or am I just not concentrating? I'm going to estimate it's the second of those two things, because apparently I'm looking around me and not looking at what's in front of me. In my more or less reclined desk chair. Which I recently got, and oddly enough is actually pretty comfy. And as a result, the GT1 is trying to get one of its laps back. Sorry. And as a result, the Toyota is trying to get back. So, we have, following this, just 19 laps to go, because I now have ...58 laps on the board. This is going to be 59. Unless I keep sliding into the walls like I am doing at the moment. It's annoying. So, 1 minute 28.5 is what the interval is now to the nissan R390, and I am steadily closing in. So it seems more or less evident to me that suddenly I cannot drive this fucking circuit. Which oddly enough, realistically, is a circuit I never have liked in particular, but again, I'm just basically being even more terrible at this circuit than I should be. Because I do not appear to have the concentration that I really need to get around this circuit. I've got to pull myself around this circuit to get through. I really cannot afford to just keep fucking this up, because the R390 could still catch me. Unless I overlap him. And I think this is now the 5th time I've overlapped the Toyota Altezza, even though it's probably the 6th, but I'm pretty sure it's the 5th time up to this point, because again, that's just how far behind the back markers are in comparison to myself and the prototypes. So hopefully that should give me some breathing room between myself and the Toyota. And I'm not even concentrating up to this point, I'm basically just finding every possible method to just immediately fuck this up. Anyways, through the Lowe's hairpin once again. The R390 is right in front of me. I'm hoping I will be able to put him a lap down before the end of this race, which oddly enough is something I've not done for basically 5 events now, considering how dominant I've been throughout the course of this race pretty much now. Luckily enough, my car does not look like it has a scratch. Although, I can assure you, if this race was happening in real life, everyone would have probably dropped out by now, because all of us have basically been scraping the walls enough for there to probably be terminal damage on the cars realistically. And is that a new best? Yes it is. New personal best. I suppose. So, my best lap time is now a 1:33.7, although at the moment of course the Nissan is not wanting to give up the position for me essentially putting him a lap down. Although that probably is going to happen before the end of this race because, well, since I have managed to get my concentration back, or at least some of my concentration, or at least my unfaded concentration, I would say it's only a matter of time before I do put the R390 that one lap down. Almost a lap down. Holy shit. I do not know how I saved that. That was very much a Kyle Busch sort of save right there. But anyways, 63 laps I'm now up to, and it looks as though the R390, as a result of my lackluster concentration, appears as though he will probably stay on the lead lap unless I can actually do something. Oh, damn it. Well, knew that was going to happen again eventually, but somehow I made it through that unscathed. At least unscathed in terms of my overall lap time, but again, up to this point I would say if I can keep my concentration going and don't racking as much as I have been doing in these most recent laps, hopefully I might be able to... Fuck! I might be able to put the R390 that one lap down. Although, I am trying my best to see if I can keep up with them. That's nice. Here we go again. Trying to prove, of course, that I'm more competent than I realistically am, because I'm not able to concentrate very well. And for me to try and see if I can prove it's still comforting enough for me to say that I am managing to, Ugh! Fuck me. Why am I suddenly not being competent enough to drive this circuit now? I thought for sure I still had it. Well, I guess that's just how much of a terrible driver I'm really on this circuit. Although, oddly enough, of course, throughout this race I've not even spun once. But anyways, I am now up into the lead. And the R390 moves me. Which is more or less what I figured he was going to do. And ultimately, I can safely say that up to this point in the race, I am very much looking like Monaco's bitch up to this point. Monaco, up to this point in the race, is basically my bitch, because I've now managed to overlap the entire field in the space of just 64 laps. And yet, up to this point in the race, I'm still trying to see if I can improve on my personal best. Even though I am technically cheating because I just used the outside wall like Lowe's had to accomplish that. But again, it doesn't matter too much because, well, speed overall is pretty much not really much of a matter. Speed is pretty much no matter for the mightiness of low gearing around this circuit, which is precisely why I've been able to lead this race for as long as I have. Even though I could have stuck to my original setup, I figured this was something I had to do if I was actually going to pull myself around the circuit overall and improve, of course, that I still had some overall on-track race. And hopefully, up to this point, I will not have to pull off a Senna. Basically, be told, oh, my gap is to the second placed car, and then suddenly just throw it away without anyone looking at what actually happened. Considering that is basically what Senna did. For this very race back in 1988, and it looks as though the Jag is battling hard, of course, with the Aspirante, although neither of those guys are letting me through, because, well, that's just the aggressive nature of the AI, and oddly enough, in some cases, I am more or less able to do the same thing. And I should not have used that outside wall, but anyways, I'm pretty sure by now I've put both of those race cars about 6 laps down by now, because that is how dominant I've been all day long in this race. Although, it won't matter too much longer because I only have up to this point now, I only have 12 laps to go after this one, and then once I have got through those 12 laps, I can basically just move onwards to see what exactly I'll be doing once I've completed time trial mode. Sorry, time attack mode I should say, because it's in arcade mode. Well, there are 2 more things I need to show off in arcade mode, and the second of those 2 things I'll probably show off by the time I've finished off with simulation mode, because, well, arcade mode does counterpose towards overall completion in this game. And I'm pretty sure there is also a glitch in this game that basically leaves you hanging at 99% completion once you've done everything else, and then you have to basically do a various number of races or things to eventually reach 100. That is a glitch I have noticed in this game, because it basically just stays at 99% until you've achieved 100%. Just literally dead on 99% is what it is. Until you've officially completed everything else. So, we now have just 11 laps to go. And I think this is where I'm going to now go for a hot lap, so let's try and see if I've got enough of an on-track interval to eventually, achieve that. Potentially. I mean, even though I might be cheating on this lap, the truth is, I'm wanting to try and see if I can go for a PB. I mean, I know there really isn't any point in this. It's probably pointless to try and see if I can go for a fastest lap now, because, well, my tyres are probably past their best, but then again, it's always worth it to try something if you're just basically dominating this race like I am at the present time. I mean, I am an entire lap ahead of the rest of the field, and that's probably the way it's going to stay because, well, the competitors in this race do not seem to have enough competence to officially, challenge me for the race win. And that's all. Suffice to say. And it's going to be a new PB, and no it isn't. Well, I just might go for 1 minute after last time here and there. I won't have to do this again. And I won't have to do this again. Also, I'm nearly 2 hours into this race, as I've just noticed. We will still have 9 laps to go once this lap is done, and then from there I can basically just keep myself going. So my best lap time overall is a 1:33.7. So I think I'm confident enough to say that I probably didn't even need super slick tyres to officially go up to the end of the race. I could have probably won this using the racing slicks, even then of course if it was by less than a lap. I could have still won this quite dominantly and probably very similarly to what I'm already achieving up to this point. If that makes any sense. Okay. Anyways. So the XJ is now once again in the pits. leaving the Esperante to take over 5th position now, it looks like, because they are both 6 laps down, and I would imagine it will probably be 7 laps down for the Jag before this race is done. Come up to overlap the Toyota, sorry, the Altazza, even though he was not giving me any room whatsoever for him to allow me to overlap him, because, well, that's just the nature of the AI in this game. Because even if they don't have the competence around the circuits that the player might have, they can still try their best to do whatever it takes to take you out. And that's essentially what it coincidentally has been doing. But somehow overall I've really not lost that much, consciousness over what exactly has happened in the race up to this point. So, 70 laps into this race, and probably going to be 71 next time around. And I'm more or less certain enough to say this will probably be more or less some coasting laps. Don't really see any point in pushing it flat out for the remainder. Even though I could be an arsehole and basically just put in for fresh tyres now to see if I can improve on my PB, but it looks like up to this point my tyres have probably gone well past their best. And yet I still have to drive another 7 laps of this course just to make it to the end. Which I would like to remind you, of course, it's not as easy as it might look. Alright, so we are not far from eclipsing the 2-hour mark, but at the same time we're also not far from reaching the end now. So I think on this set of boots I will just about be able to make it to the end of the race, but again, it would just depend on knowing, of course, if the driver, which is me, has enough competence as well as energy to make it up to the end of the race. Although, at least I can say this race isn't as long as Tokyo was, because, well, Tokyo was just torture for how long that race was. It was virtually the longest race in this game overall, and I do mean the longest single race in this game, because I had to drive 100 laps around Tokyo, and that took me nearly 3 hours to do it. That's literally just how painstaking it was. Just to literally try and get myself to last up to the end of the race without falling asleep, and I keep forgetting there was a braking zone there for some reason. Also, furthermore, I've just noticed there are pine trees. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, palm trees. Yeah, that's what that's the word I was looking for. Palm trees is what I was thinking of. don't ask me about that when we do this. But anyways, heading by the luxury yachts once again. Don't really have anything else to give up to this point, except for saying that once again it's going to be a race where I end up overlapping the entire field, and where ultimately, on the whole, this is going to be another race of assertive domination. Because even though I was on the back foot to begin this race, essentially I was quickly able to correct myself from that, and once the first pit stop was made, it basically just helped me to fire the cannon of technically just going onwards to more or less dominate the rest of this race, which I am going to do so successfully. Also, God only knows how pretty much nightmarish it's going to be for me to export the Tokyo Endurance, because that race is nearly 3 hours long. I'm pretty sure that will probably be a nightmare in some cases, just to try and get it exported. But again, my car at the moment is in good condition. Doesn't look as though the oil light is going to turn red, even though I'll probably still change the oil anyway, because well, that's what I do. And ultimately, up to this point, I would say it's undeniable that I pretty much have no possibilities of losing this race, unless the system goes off, because I'm pretty much a lap ahead of the rest of the field now. I'm more or less confident enough to say that I'm definitely going to win this race, regardless of what happens, because these AI just do not know how to get around a circuit such as this one. We have just passed the 2-hour mark, so as I would have anticipated, this race has taken just about over 2 hours. This race has officially taken just over 2 hours for me to complete. Well, 2 hours and a couple of minutes, but I don't know how many fucking minutes it's going to be. Anyways, we have 3 laps to go after this one, and then the endurance events will be done. And furthermore, yes, I did of course complete the World Championship before I did the rally events and the endurance events, and then once I basically did those, I more or less went pretty much the ways of the AI by pretty much just dominating this race, with the default of me having less competence to get around this circuit than the AI does. Which realistically is the only preservative reason as to why exactly. lap 76. This will pretty much put me out there with just 2 laps to go now, and then once I have done those 2 laps, the endurance events of this game will officially be D-O-N-E done. After probably 2 painstaking weeks of me trying to get through all of these pretty much, or just under 2 painstaking weeks. Alright, so we have just 2 laps to go now. Yeah, okay. Right before the final lap, I just literally had to spin out. Which is more or less what I thought I was going to do. And I think I've now put the XJ almost 7 laps down. Although in saying that, the XJ forcefully... Although, as I say that, the XJ tries to... I was about to sneeze, but it looks as though by now I have officially put the XJ 7 laps down. And yep, I have got no steering camber from the front tyres in any way, shape or form. And yes, I am trying to stay ahead of the Jag whilst I'm doing it. But I think it's fair to say that my tyres are dead. Or at least my front tyres, judging by the steering camber. To be dead. Anyways, here we go, final lap, and I reckon this will probably take me somewhere over 2 hours and 6 minutes to officially complete. But here we are. This race will be done, finally, after just over 2 painstaking hours of almost dullness since I took the lead, and have basically not looked back ever since. Even though I wouldn't have attempted to use the Ford Falcon it because, well, I think the Ford Falcon would probably be too heavy for a course like Monaco. Anyways, heading through the tunnel now for the final time, and down of course into the Nouvelle chicane, and yep, I think it's pretty much clear to say that I now have no brakes in any way, shape or form. And the Jag is now going to finish, it looks like 6 laps down, or potentially 7, because I now have, because my front tyres are pretty much dead. Even though it doesn't look like it, in terms of the steering, my tyres are pretty much dead, as I'm trying to put the Jag that 1 additional lap down. And the only reason why I'm wrecking into him is because I virtually have no front brakes. Although it doesn't matter, because I'm still going to win here at Monaco anyway, so there we go. I dominate the Mistral 78 laps. Okay, let's now see where everyone else will finish. Alright, everyone has managed to finish. So in the end of that, I overlapped the back markers 5 times during that race. So I finished 1 lap ahead of both the Nissan R390 and the Toyota GT1, who were 2nd and 3rd, and we win 500,000 credits from this race. That is a big payday. Anyways, so in the end of that, I won by a lap over both the Nissan R390 and the Toyota GT1, and then Fourth position, it was the Toyota Altezza, who was doing much better than the Aspirante and the Jag, which I just managed to put 6 laps down at the end of the race. Meanwhile, the Panos Aspirante along with the Altezza were both 5 laps down, and it is now prize car time. So what are we going to win today? What a surprise, we get another F1 car, and now let's get our second prize car for completing the endurance events. And what are we going to get? Another Polyphony 001, which I believe in the NTSC version is known as the F094S. But there we go, that is all 10 endurance events done and dusted. Finally. And well, just because I want to, I'm gonna give this thing an oil change. I know I haven't driven more than 180 miles in that race, but I just figured it would only be suitable. And win ratio still has not changed, but we are now 87.5% complete with the game. And now let's head up to the top. Although first off I want to see how many miles I drove. 259 kilometers, so that's probably... oh, okay, that didn't work. So that's more or less about 156 miles? 57? Well, I don't know. Anyways, for winning the Mistral 78 laps, we get another F6 88S, as it is known in the NTSC version of the game, and for completing all of the endurance events we get this thing. We get another Polyphony 001. And so, that, my friends, was the endurance event, and next time we shall be getting on with time attack mode. So, I shall see you guys in the next segment, which will be time attack mode. Stay tuned for more of Gran Turismo 3.